really like question D, but it is a little tricky. You've got to make sure that you understand that you're looking for when g of x is negative. And I think that if you did the candidates test, that would actually help you with this process. Now, part of the thing that makes this question so tricky is the fact that this 2, again, we've talked about that, this 2 right here is in the middle of your interval. It's not on the far left. So if that 2 is right here in the middle, I erased all my scribbles so we could see a little better. If the 2 is right there in the middle, moving to the right is something that we're pretty comfortable with. But moving to the left reverses my order. So if it reverses my order, it reverses my signs, and that gets a little bit more complex for us to deal with. First things first, I would go to the right. And I would use this as kind of a guide, my candidates test from part C. I would use that as a guide to kind of check myself. But if I'm moving to the right, I know that if I integrate from 2 to 2, I know that my value of g is 2, 0. Okay, 2, 0 is kind of my starting point here. So if I move to the right, I'm increasing until I get to 6. Well, I increased 8 units. And that was given again in my candidates test. And then I decreased this entire time. So I decreased another 8 units. So those canceled each other out. So I was never negative anywhere in that interval. But I am negative by the time I go from 10 to 12. Because now I'm going down even further. So I'm going 4 units down from 0. So I know I'm going to be negative there. So my g of x is going to be negative or less than 0 on the interval from 10 to 12. So you can write it like that. You can also write it as interval notation, right? Inequality, interval, doesn't matter. Either one is totally fine. But then you got to work going the other direction. And the other direction is a little bit tricky. So I'm going to see if I can explain this efficiently for you. Remember in our candidates test that these guys right here, this piece, that's where I started, right? So when x is negative 4, my y is negative 4. So right here, I found a value of negative 4 on g. Okay, not just on f, but on g, that was my value. But remember, because this is g prime, this little piece right here, my g prime is negative. So I was at negative 4, and then I decreased even further. And my candidates test verifies that. So I was at negative 4, then I decreased to negative 8. So in order for me to be less than 0, which I am in that interval, like I can go 8 more units up before I get above 0, not just 4 units. Okay, that's kind of the tricky piece here. So even though it looks like this area and this area cancel each other out, which they do, you're not considering the fact that that value, I am not at 0 when I started. Okay, that's the trick here. You were actually at negative 4. So I need a positive 8, because when I got here, when I got to that negative 2, my value was at negative 8. So I would have to get to positive 8 before I got all the way to 0. Well, this triangle right here is going to give me 8 units. So that triangle is 8 units. So all the way from negative 4 to 2, I actually stayed negative. But when I got to 2, I ended up landing on 0. So I was negative till I got to 0, and then I got positive, and then I went back down, but I'm not negative yet. I'm positive until I get into the 10 to 12 range. Another way to analyze that, or just to think about it, is you can go this direction and just know that you're negative, right? So you can go, okay, I was at 0, but even though this area is above the x-axis because my order's messed up, I know that all of that is negative area. And I could treat this as positive area, and that's certainly not enough positive area to counteract and get me back up into my positive values. Okay, so you could just think about it that way, but you do have to flip that order. So the other interval that I'm looking at is you are going to be negative from negative 4 to 2. And again, you can write that in interval notation as well. Let's just take a quick look at the key, right? So this is your rubric where the points come from. A and B are really small, right? So just 1 point apiece, but you do get a point for that g prime of x is equal to f. So that's big. You can get 3 points, I think, pretty easily right here. even if you just consider that, okay, at x equals -2 and x equals 6, I have possible maxes and mins, and then at x equals -4 and x equals 12, those are my endpoints. I could have a max and min there as well. So if you consider all 4 of those pieces, you're going to get 2 more points, and now you're sitting pretty good, even if you can't complete the candidates test or you don't understand D. All right, that's a lot. I know there's a lot there, but some of you guys are making some pretty silly mistakes in analyzing these graphs. You cannot take this piece and just start talking about F, start talking about G prime, and not make this statement. Okay, that statement is the key to all of these questions. And so you're going to have to make that statement loud and clear for the reader to know what you're talking about.